So you're listening to Let's Stay Together. This is a podcast about the series Fruits Basket by Natsuki Takaya, the manga and the anime series. And I'm Ellen.
I'm Kayla.
And today we're talking about the first two chapters of the Fruits Basket manga. So we're going to do just kind of a summary. I'm gonna read to you my summary of everything that happened in the series, and then we're going to discuss what happened, and then at the end we'll play some music, and then we're going to have our kind of spoilery discussion about how these two chapters fit into the series overall, for people who want to listen to that. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, sweet. So let's begin then. So the first chapter opens. It opens with an omake in the bound Tokyo Pop version. And the omake is Yuki piling more trash on this pile of trash at their house, which is the best. The next thing that happens is that the actual opening of the story opens with a girl stepping out of a tent on a bright sunny day, saying it's going to be a hot one, and she says goodbye to a photo of her mother and then leaves the tent. And the tent is huge, which I think is funny. I don't know why. There's something about it that's like, when I think of a tent, I always think of like a small tent.
I think the producers of the first anime agreed with you, because I watched the first couple episodes and it's a much tinier tent.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, it's big enough for like a whole bed and then some books and stuff. Like, I mean, I guess if you're going to live in a tent, you should live in a luxurious tent, but...
Yeah. I think this is unreasonable. This child should suffer more.
Yeah, definitely. She should be suffering more. You know, just living in a tent isn't enough. It better be a small tent. So she leaves a tent and she decides that she has a bit of time, so she wants to explore the woods where she's living now. And I don't understand how she has time for school. Like, I'm not a morning person. We always had to be at school super early, and I was like, forget this.
You can tell Toru isn't running late because she doesn't have a little bit of toast hanging from her mouth.
No, she's on time, for sure. She's leisurely... Or maybe she doesn't have food. I don't know. I mean, also, she doesn't have a toaster, so... as far as we know, which is a little sad, but whatever. So she...
How she is eating.
I don't know. I never thought about it until just this moment. We've already talked about this. We test recorded this once. We never talked about this. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe she's like going to the convenience store and getting food or something. Getting all the fresh bread and egg salad sandwiches that she can afford.
You have a little stack of plastic containers in the corner then.
Probably. She's saving them for the burnable garbage, you know.
Yeah.
So they're neatly sorted in the tent.
Yeah, they would be though if it was Toru.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know why I'm making that joke. It's probably a reality.
Yeah.
So she's walking through the woods where she lives, and she finds this, she comes across a traditional style Japanese house in the woods. She kind of creeps up to it, and she sees that on the porch there are a set of Chinese zodiac ornaments drying. And while she's admiring them, kind of a young-looking man steps out and talks to her about the ornaments, and he's like, I thought you young people were bored by these old-fashioned things like the Chinese zodiac. But Toru is not bored, and she asks why he doesn't have a cat ornament. And this segues into a story about how the animals of the Chinese zodiac came to be. And the story that Toru tells us is about the story that her mother told her, that God invited all the animals to a banquet, and the rat, trying to trick the cat, told the cat that it would be not the following day, but 2 days after. So the next day, all the animals come to the banquet, and the order that they arrived determined the order of the years of the zodiac. So starting with the rat, who rode on the ox and then jumped off of the ox right before going into the banquet. So he arrived first, and then the ox, and then all the other animals subsequently, and all except for the cat, who slept through the banquet because he was led astray by the rat. And the story that Toru's mother is telling in her memory is interrupted by baby crying Toru, saying that she feels bad for the cat, that he was left out of the banquet. So Shigure and Toru, this man and Toru talk for a bit, and another young boy comes out of the house and bonks this guy on the head with a bag, with his school bag, which he says is very heavy.
2 dictionaries in it.
He has 2 dictionaries. He was prepared for just such an event happening.
Yeah.
I don't think he's introduced himself yet, so we'll skip ahead. So Toru recognizes the boy, though, as someone from her school. We cut to the school, to class 1D, where some bitch is sassing Toru for coming to school with Yuki, and they demand an explanation. So we learned that Yuki is the prince of the school. He's very popular, and that's why the girls were kind of demanding that Toru explain why she was walking to school with him. We also cut to a tall, blonde, and menacing looking girl, and then also a goth threaten the girl who's harassing Toru, which kind of scares her off. So we are introduced to Toru's two friends, Arisa Otani, the blonde girl, and Saki Hanajima, the goth. I'm just gonna call her the goth, but it was the 90s, you know. We also get an introduction to Hana's Denpa, and she says, like, about the girl who was threatening Toru, that she could beep them with her electropoison waves. I think we'll talk about it in our discussion part. So we cut back to a scene, the scene that we were at before at Yuki's house, where Shigure is then introduced. Shigure says that he's Yuki's cousin. We know that Toru and Yuki are classmates, obviously, and Toru says that she lives nearby, which I think is a surprise to Shigure and Yuki. We cut back to school, and now it looks like they're in home ec class, which is so Toru and Hana and Uo are preparing some things, and they have this conversation. But the really funny thing is that you can see these people in the background who are like messing up their food, and they're like, "Wow, like you need to add more stuff." And it's really something I didn't notice before. It's really funny. So Toru says that Yuki is handsome, and Hana says that her kind of wavy powers say that he's weird. And Uo recounts a time that an upperclassman confessed her feelings to him, and he pushed her away, which, you know, is super, super princey behavior. It's exactly how I'd expect to be treated by a prince, someone who's called a prince. So we get a little bit of an introduction to Yuki and his personality and kind of what's going on at the school. They make this meal, and the teacher comes over and is like sassing them for talking, but it turns out that the meal's already perfectly made. So Toru, it's revealed that also in this conversation that Toru is working part-time, and she uses the excuse of having to pay for school and kind of save for a future, but in her internal monologue she talks about how she's lying to her friends. She's not telling that she lives in the woods. She says that she's staying with her father's family. And she also has this. She says that if her friends found out, they would be upset. Ooh, particularly would be outraged, and so she'd burst into Grandpa's house on her motorcycle. And I'm just like, does she have a motorcycle? I didn't remember that when I was reading through this, but I guess she does. So after all of this, after class, Toru runs into Yuki at the shoe lockers when she's leaving school. Which then, you know, turns out to be a terrible idea, because then he has this whole rant about how cats are foolish and that he hates them, and then he lectures her about how the zodiac was also a calendar. I guess he overheard her conversation with Shigure. So he has this, he talks about how the Chinese zodiac system was a system for keeping time. It was, you know, the whole myth was added later, and there's nothing more to that, and that's it. And regardless, there was never any room for a cat in the zodiac to begin with, which seems a little personal, if you ask me. He
That's
also...
how Toru reacts every time they talk about the cat really personally.
Like, there was never room for a cat. And she's like, well, okay. That's your opinion. He also says that Toru is looking a little bit pale, and that she should take it easy, which of course means that she's going to die. So...
And I think she has to start delicately coughing blood into a handkerchief.
Yes, I think you're right. You're right. That's not... just not being pale is not enough. If she was trying to, like, secretly cough into a handkerchief and then hide it and everyone saw it, then she would definitely be marked for death. But not in this case. So, also, we get another snapshot of the kind of bitchy girl from earlier saying that... warning Toru not to get a swelled head... because she's getting attention from Yuki, and then she kind of wonders about Yuki. The next scene we get is this kind of sad flashback to Toru's family life. You know, we're introduced to her. We get some more information about her mother. So we saw the photo, which of course implies that she has passed away in the first part of the story. She thinks that life was harder for her mother. she gives us some backstory about that her father passed away when she was 3, and she remembers how her family, after her mother died, so her mother raised her on her own, and after her mother died, she remembers how her family argued about who would take her in, which is really sad. It's very, very sad.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually she moved in with her grandfather. She lived there for 4 months, and now they're doing some renovations because her aunt's family is moving in. And that's why she's living in the woods. I also noted in this flashback, you see her grandfather calling her Kyoko-san. So he doesn't necessarily call her by name. In this flashback, there's this little photo of Toru. She's holding a notebook that says family budget. So I'm like, is Toru keeping the budget? That's both adorable and also a little bit sad. Like she's clearly kind of like forced into some responsibilities because she lived with her mother on her own, and she recognizes how hard it was for her mother to raise her on her own. We also, in this montage, in this kind of like flashback, we see a little bit of her early days at the tent, living in the tent. And there's and there's also a montage of her working, and the tent almost gets blown away in a storm. And her coworkers also comment in the background about how hardworking she is. So we're getting to know a little bit about Toru's character here, and these early things were being introduced to her. So later that night, Shigure and Yuki see Toru walking through the woods, and they realize that there's no way that she could be living nearby because all the land around there is owned by the Soma family. So they follow her to her tent creepily, and then she comes back out of the tent to wash her face because she needs to study after she's been went to school and worked late. And Yuki and Shigure are creeping right outside, and Shigure just like laughs straight in her face, which is so polite.
He's laughing through the entire next scene too.
He is. So but they do invite her over, even though they laugh at her. They do invite her over, and she asks if it's okay to stay on the land. And Shigure makes this joke about where she'll plug in her curling iron. Like, there's no way that she has a curling iron. Like, anyway, it's funny. And he thinks it's really funny of himself to make that joke. And then she proclaims that it's fine, that she can take care of herself, and then she promptly faints, of course, because as foreshadowed by her paleness.
Yeah. No, there's a thing Toru does in this scene too, which is one of my favorite things about her. Because when she's talking about she's got like a little bit earlier where she's thinking about all the hardships of living in her tent. Yes. She says something about being visited by slugs instead of door-to-door salesmen. And then while she's reassuring Shigure and Yuki that she's fine out there, she just says like, "It's okay, I don't mind the slugs." And they're like, "What?" She does this thing where she just like has this whole internal monologue that she doesn't say out loud, and then just says the last thing out loud. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's funny. You're right. She does do that a lot. Yeah, it's just the first time. It's funny. Yeah. So she does. Yes, she says that. And so Shigure and Yuki kind of scramble to find some ice and take care of her, but the kitchen is a sty. So yeah, that doesn't go so well. While all of this kind of scramble is happening, a wolf howls in the night, and Shigure reports sort of semi-mysteriously that there was a landslide nearby. And then they joke that, like, but not near the tent, right?
It's totally near the tent.
It's totally near the tent. Yes, exactly. So they go back to check the tent, and the tent is completely covered in mud from this mudslide. When they get to the tent, Toru freaks out. She's like, "My mother's in there. She's suffering." She tries to dig her out, but Shigure and Yuki convince her to calm down, and they'll come back the next day to deal with the tent because she's sick. And that her mother wouldn't want her to exert herself anymore and be dangerous.
And something that didn't really occur to me when I was first reading the series, but she would 100% have been dead.
No, totally, she would have died. She would have been dead. I mean, I guess she might have been washing her face. There's a very slim chance she wouldn't have been in there, but
the other option is that she fainted into the river while she was washing her face.
Yes,
she was so exhausted.
Yes, that's also a possibility. Always a possibility, or just something else terrible could have happened. And also, I think when something I never noticed is like the very first scene, like when she's walking out of the tent, you can see the cliff like ominously in the background too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, scary. She definitely would have been dead. And nobody would have known where she was because she was lying to everyone about where she was. So, public service announcement: always tell someone where you are, just in case.
Send that text to your friends.
Tell your Tumblr followers that
Yeah.
you're that you're staying in a tent. You don't have to tell everyone, but you need to tell someone.
If I don't reblog something in 12 hours,
They'll
I've
have been
been
a
caught in a
mudslide.
landslide.
Yeah,
So no.
exactly. Exactly. So anyway, so they get Toru back to the house, and back at the house, she's all tucked in. They've gotten her settled down, and she's like borrowing a. I don't know what kind of kimono it is, but she's borrowing some kind of kimono. So I'm like, did they just have extra lying around? This is constantly people are coming over to Shigure's house, and constantly they have something to wear that like they didn't bring. Like anyway, it's just maybe that's some foreshadowing, but like so she just they have something that she can change into, and she goes to bed.
I wouldn't be surprised if Shigure just randomly has women's clothing around them.
Actually, based on the first interaction that we had between them, yeah, I guess it's possible. Or like it's not clear who owns this house. Like Shigure and Yuki live there, so maybe there's just stuff there, like it's furnished. I think it's yeah. So anyway, okay. While she's laying in bed, she tells Shigure about what happened to her mother. So when they were living in their apartment one night, Toru stayed up very late studying. And every morning she used to tell her mother to always come home safe. But that morning, after she stayed up late, she overslept and she didn't have the chance to say goodbye to her mother. And so she wasn't able to say goodbye on the day of the accident. And she says that her mother never graduated from high school, and she wanted Toru to do that so that Toru would have a better life and have more opportunities. And she tells Shigure about her goal to graduate from high school and about her mother, and then she falls asleep. Yuki comes in, having overheard this, and says, that you never know about her struggles because she's so carefree at school. And he says that he thinks it's incredible that she lives alone in a tent and how she could never run away. He could never run away. He only could run away so far. He ran to Shigure's house, that he's always wanted to leave the Soma house, but he couldn't get that far. And Shigure also says, if you think that that's incredible, then you don't understand Toru's struggle. After that, he goes to dig up her things, but he doesn't go alone. So,
single creepiest panel in the entire series.
It's so creepy. It's creepy in the anime. It's creepy. It's like even creepier in the anime because it's animated. So you see all these this legion of mice behind him creeping.
He does this slow rotation to the camera.
It's his model pose, as I like to think of
it's
it.
It's all unnecessary.
It's all very unnecessary. It's like this dramatic, really creepy thing, but then it could have been a lot less creepy. I don't know. And I know the first time that I read this, it didn't really register with me that they were a bunch of rats. Like, he calls a bunch of rats to go and help him, if you didn't get that by reading this. Or at least what happens is he says he's not going alone, and a picture of many, many rats have swarmed around him. And you can, upon further inspection, you can tell, the ones in the front are very clearly defined as rats. And I think they're making a little rat sound effect, too, which I obviously couldn't read at the time. Because, not all the sound effects are translated in this. So he goes to extricate her things.
The SAT word there.
Extricate. Yeah. I know a couple good words, He goes to dig things up. So we cut back to Toru, who's dreaming. She's having a memory of her mother saying, "You have a fever again. Don't push yourself so hard. You just need to be yourself and take things at your own pace." And then we also see in this kind of dream or memory, a boy giving a young girl a hat. The young girl looks like Toru. We don't really get any information about the little boy. She says this thing that's really interesting. She says, "This time if I don't push myself a little, I'll die alone." And I never really thought about that deeply until now. I don't know at this point in the story what this is kind of getting at. It seems a little bit over dramatic. It's like she pushed herself a bit, and she's clearly taken on too many things. She's going to school, she's working part-time, and then she's trying to live on her own too in a tent, and that's resulted in her being in this position. But I don't know. Anyway, it's just something that I noticed this time. Maybe this will become a little bit clearer later when her character develops, when we get more information about some of these things that are being alluded to right now. But it's really sad. So Toru's not in a good state at this point in the story, I think. So after this kind of dream sequence, she wakes up And Yuki brings all her stuff, including her mom's picture, which is awesome. When she wakes up, her mom's photo is like right in front of her, so they've set it up for her. And she asks how Yuki did it, and he says it's a secret, a furry secret. So he invites her to stay at their house, but she refuses, saying that it would be too much trouble. And they eventually convince her by implying that she can do housework for them and take care of things for them, and that'll be fine. And she kind of acquiesces to this, and Yuki is like, well, you have nowhere else to go, right? So, so they kind of, I don't know. When I read the story, I was just like, oh, she just decides to live with them. And now that I'm kind of looking at this dialogue, it's like, yeah, she didn't really have any other options.
Yeah.
She gets a bit, I'm not going to say forced into it, but she gets a little bit, she has to deeply consider that she doesn't have other options, right?
Yeah.
So
she kind of gets like sort of rushed along into it rather than making the conscious choice, but I don't think she's unhappy with it.
I don't think so. I mean, I think obviously I think it's okay, but it's like, and it works out for her, and I think she's cool with it. And then she gets this to live with people again, because I'm sure she wasn't happy living by herself, based on like things about her character that come later, right? So, but yeah, it seems a little bit rushed.
I feel like you'd kind of have to do that with Toru though, to get over her like desire not to be a burden on people.
I think so. I agree with that.
Because, I mean, the whole reason she's living in a tent is she doesn't want to be a burden to her grandpa or her
friends. Very true. I think she needs to be lightly forcibly convinced to do things that are that's going to impact someone else. At this point in the story, you do kind of have to.
Interested in not burdening other people at the moment.
That's correct, yeah, for sure. But they do convince her to stay, and so Yuki's showing her around the house, and he asks about all of the rules, like what should she do and not do in the house, and he echoes her mother's words by saying, just be yourself and you'll fit right in, don't worry about it. So Yuki also brings her up to her room, and Toru's helping not to cause too much trouble, and she's borrowing Yuki's clothes, which is really funny. They're like huge on her. And while she's worrying about not causing too much trouble, her thoughts are interrupted by a crash through the ceiling. It's some a-hole has jumped in through the ceiling. He immediately...
Is it to say you think you're causing trouble?
Yeah, no, basically.
Watch this.
Just wait. So the boy who jumps through the roof immediately threatens Yuki with this strange, like, shit talk. He's, like, calling him a rat. I don't know that would be my first choice of words for a confrontation, but Yuki says that the boy who jumped in is still too weak to beat him. Toru begs them to stop and grabs the other boy from behind. And just as Shigure, there's, like, a little cutscene where Shigure is, like, looking up like he heard a noise, and Shigure comes to check on everything. And when the dust settles and Shigure comes upstairs, Toru lifts a cat up out of the dust. And that's the end of the first chapter. Yay. There's also an omake at the end of the first chapter about Kyo bombing the entrance exam to Yuki's school on purpose, which I think is really funny.
Not bombing the entrance exam.
Not bombing the entrance exam, yeah. Like, they suggest that he do that, and he's like, why didn't I think of that? And I think, in retrospect, that's also really funny when you kind of know Kyo's character a little bit. But yeah, so that happens too.
Kind of endearingly earnest.
He is earnest, yes, I think so. He looks just like that thought wouldn't even occur to him.
Yeah.
So we get into the next chapter. So speaking of Kyo, since I have spoiled his name, but we get into the next chapter, which immediately begins with Toru putting two and two together and realizing that Kyo has turned into a cat, and wanting to take him to the hospital, which is also, it's like, I don't think that's going to help.
Maybe the vet.
Yeah, maybe the vet. Like, maybe she...
I also love the dialogue there, because she kind of figures it out. It's just like, I hit him in the wrong place, and he turned into a cat. And Shigure says, no, well, yeah, kind of.
Well, yeah. Yes, it's great. And she conveniently gets bonked on the head by a piece of falling debris, and then passes out onto Yuki and Shigure, who turn into a dog and a rat. So Shigure was on the phone in that little cutscene that I mentioned where he looks up. So I guess he was ordering food. So a delivery man appears with food, which is, first of all, it's interesting because I'm like, you can order delivery in the morning in Japan? ? Like, I don't know. When I think of delivery, I think of at least lunchtime food, I guess.
Yeah, it says he's ordering breakfast.
He's ordering breakfast, right.
Second of all, that food gets there incredibly fast.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
jealous.
right. He's on the phone, then he walks upstairs and like has time to turn into a dog, and then the delivery man is there. So
Yeah.
this is like within 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I don't know. Maybe in Japan delivery is super fast. I'm
When I order delivery, it's like estimated 45 to
40,
50 minutes. I'm like,
like but then at least you don't have to leave the house, which is the most important part. So the delivery man appears with food, and Toru runs downstairs, and she's like, "They're all animals," which makes me laugh every time. Like, it's a terrible, like, joke or whatever. But so Shigure,
and the delivery guy's just like, so they are.
Yes, they are.
They are animals.
Indeed. And so Doggy Shigure brings Shigure's wallet and pays the man. As soon as the delivery man leaves, they start to argue with each other, which freaks Toru out even more because she's like, "Oh, they can talk." We then get the exposition that the Soma family are possessed by the vengeful spirits of the animals of the Chinese zodiac and the cat. So this is the first time that this possession is mentioned, and we get a bit of kind of definition of the curse. So the family's been cursed for hundreds of years. And he says they don't have superpowers, but he's like, well, actually, we do have a power that we can communicate with our respective animals. When the members of the family who are possessed are weak, or they're hugged by a member of the opposite sex, they transform. And then they change back into their human selves after an indeterminate amount of time. But of course, they're naked, which segues into them transforming back naked. So we get to the scene where they're all back and dressed again, and they're sitting in the living room, I guess, or like where the table is that they eat at, and Kyo sasses them for letting Toru stay there. He's like, "Why? What is she doing here? Why do you have a woman in the house? Like, whatever." And they, Shigure in turn sasses Kyo for not noticing her, saying that like he's at martial arts training, he should notice someone like that. Yuki calls him an outcast, so then of course he immediately reacts by crushing a table, by breaking it in half, and half of that's the only reaction when someone calls me something. So first, he calls Yuki a rat, then Yuki calls him an outcast, and then he smashes a table. So, it's the only reaction.
Normal family dinner.
Totally. Also, he entered by crushing the roof, so normal family interactions all around. So he
doesn't Shigure say something like, "Did you crush the roof again?"
I think he does, yeah. I think you're right. Piece of the table, like, kind of bends up and smacks Toru in the head, which causes Kyo to startle, and then Yuki actually slaps Kyo for that, and then they start fighting full on, while Shigure gently, like, tends to the cut on Toru's head. Shigure and Toru talk about Kyo and Yuki's relationship, so we get a little bit of background. They always fought, and Shigure predicts a victory for Yuki, which then, of course, comes true when he throws Kyo through the door. So we have even more damage to Shigure's house. Toru realizes that she's running late for school, and of course we know that she's very fixated on this goal of completing high school. So she runs off and grabs her dirty uniform that's like covered in mud from the mudslide and throws that on, and then says that she's heading out to school, which is very determined. So like if you were in a situation where you were living in a tent, your tent got crushed by a landslide, and you stayed at a mysterious stranger's house overnight, and then another mysterious stranger came in the next day, and there was a fight, and you got smacked in the head with a table, you would still run off to high school? Yes or no?
Same without the animal transformations.
And the animal transformations. Yeah. And she also realized that people turn into animals, so she still goes to school. That's some determination.
I think I'd take a personal day for that one.
I think so. We would call that a mental health day.
Yeah, mental health day.
So yes. So she runs. However, Toru's not like us. She runs off to school in her dirty uniform. Shigure lets her know that he's going to have to talk to Akido, the head of the family, about what happened. And then she's like, "Okay, whatever you have to do." And then she goes to school. After she leaves, Yuki asks about having her memories suppressed. And Shigure is like, "I don't know, so we'll have to talk to Akido." They tell Kyo to fix the house and not disappear again. So Yuki goes to school, Shigure goes to talk to the head of the family. Back at school, Toru was able to borrow the school's like washing machine, which is also, I find interesting. I don't think I ever went to a school that had a washing machine. I don't know. But
I do have them, just not.
Maybe for, I don't know. For sure not for students. I would never have assumed that the school that I went to had one. Maybe they have them for like home ec or something. I don't know. But at
Yeah, just like
school, oh,
aprons to toss in or something.
maybe. So she borrows the washing machine to wash her uniform, and the bitchy girl from before makes a comment about the mud looking good on Toru, and then Hana chases her off. So we're good. We got everything's fine once again. She goes to change back into her regular uniform. Oh, she's wearing her gym uniform while all this is going on, and their gym uniforms are nice. We never had gym uniforms that nice, I don't think. So she goes to change. She comes back out, and Yuki's like creeping outside, waiting for her. And he asks if she told her friends about what happened. And of course, she says no, and she would never give up a secret. And she offers to sign her name in blood or burn herself with a cigarette like her mom would. And Yuki's kind of like, what are you talking about? So Yuki tells her that her memories might be erased. He gives us a little bit of exposition about something that happened when he was younger. So when he was in second grade, he was playing with a bunch of kids, and he transformed, and then all the kids' memories needed to be erased. In his flashback that he asked Akito about it, and he asked Akito if he was strange, or why the kids' memories had to be erased. And Akito says, so Akito's off screen here, and Akito says, or like off panel, I guess, here, and says, if normal people knew about your secret, it would sicken them. They would stay away from you to be forced to live alone. So he's having this kind of a memory while he's talking to Toru. He apologizes about whatever might happen to her, and he apologizes for getting involved with the family's problems. He can't go against whatever Akito says. He starts to kind of like walk off, like after that mic drop. He just like, okay, bye. I can't go against what Akito says later. And Toru grabs him and is like, wait, which of course causes him to transform again. So they also have this kind of awkward apology exchange where Toru is like, I just want you to do whatever makes your family comfortable. But she asks him to be her friend if her memories get erased. And when Yuki transforms back and then he gets dressed, Toru fixes his tie. And then he asks, you're not sickened by me? She says, nope, I'm fine. Because it says in the thing that she misunderstood what he was asking. But, she acts like everything's fine, everything's cool. And then they walk home together. He asks her to walk home together, and so they do. At home, and it's charming. At home, Toru goes upstairs and finds Kyo patching the roof. He tries to apologize. He starts with something, but gets interrupted when Shigure comes back and announces to them that Toru can stay if she keeps the secret, which is awesome. So she doesn't have anywhere to go and her tent is ruined. And Kyo must also stay there with them. And neither Yuki nor Kyo are happy about this. They both are, I think, enraged is the word that I would use to describe it. Yuki asks if Shigure and Akito are scheming something, which is interesting. There's a little flashback that looks like it's the exchange between Shigure and Akito. And the dialogue that we see there, we see someone who's not Shigure, so I assume that's Akito. It says, this may prove fortuitous for Yuki and Kyo, and for me, Yuki does have good instincts, but proceed with caution. So, perhaps they are scheming something. It's certainly implied. But Shigure kind of ignores this. He doesn't really comment on it. And at the end of the chapter, Toru thanks them for looking after her, and that she's indebted to them. And to Kyo as well, which causes another fight and causes the door to be broken again for some reason. So that's the end of our first two chapters of Fruits Basket. So I started keeping
animal transformation and property damage.
Yeah, for sure. That's the themes that we have emerged so far, for sure. The first because of that, so I started a tracker for how much I took note of how much damage there was. So we had the roof. I guess I didn't include the table here, but the table, and then the doors, the exterior sliding doors, were damaged twice in all of the events that happened in these first two chapters.
And this will not be the end of the damage to Shigure's house.
No, it certainly won't, which is why I thought it would be funny to keep track. So yeah, there's that. So there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about specifically. So the first one is Hana's Denpa. Hana mentioned that she can... She alluded to she threatened the girl by saying that she could beep her with electro poison waves. And so I did a little bit of reading about Denpa. I think so in the Tokyo Pop version, I don't think they don't call it, or maybe they just call it electric waves. I didn't make a note.
I think it just is poison waves or something.
Poison waves.
Yeah, it's just electro poison waves.
Electro poison waves. It might. I think they might translate it later. This power.
I think it's weird that they didn't have any note at the back or anything. They used to be full of this is notes on.
This is what an onigiri is. Yeah.
These words, but
yeah. This one in particular doesn't have that. There are things that are like commented on in this series for sure about that like have culture notes, but this specifically doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
so what this is it's called Denpa. So I looked up Denpa before this to kind of just read about it, and I think maybe the reason that it's alluded to in this specific way is that it might be something that people who are familiar with Japanese comics, so like the audience in Japan is probably already familiar with Denpa. It's like a concept that's existed since, I don't know, like the 80s, and it's common in a lot of different fantasy series. So Denpa essentially is the ability to so Denpa, I guess, is the ability to sense certain things from electromagnetic waves. And the way that it's described on Wikipedia, it kind of reminded me of like people who say they can hear the radio in their teeth or whatever. Like it's kind of the connotation is that it's kind of like a crackpot thing. And I think, at least that's how it is stated on Wikipedia. And I think that I think like here we're getting this interesting take on Denpa that Hana might be able to control it. So she can control what she does with her Denpa as well as reading what is going on with other people. She comments, this is something I think we can track when there's more information about it.
Like take it seriously or
they do
face value in the series. Like the girls she threatens are afraid of her, and Uo tells her not to do anything, and when she says she gets like a weird feeling about people, they all like listen to it. And
it's true. And I think even Toru was like, wow, I wish I could sense things like Hana does about people. She says something about it too. So yes, it's taken very seriously. I think it's interesting that I didn't really think about this before because like the first, when I read the series, I was like, it's just another, like it's an anime thing. She has powers. But she's one of the only people other than the Somas that has any kind of supernatural ability of any kind.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we have her and also the Somas that are cursed. So I don't know, it's cool.
Because it's not really a fantasy series beyond the curse.
That's the way that's stated for sure, yeah. So yes, other than the curse, it's supposed to be kind of like it's a slice of life and also the curse. Yeah. So anyway, so we get Hana's Denpa is introduced here, and we get there's a little bit of detail about it. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes forward. It's interesting that she seems to be kind of like seeing what's going on all the time, getting a kind of extra feeling about people that others don't have. Your point is apt that she, like the other kids take it very seriously when she threatens them with her waves. We also so one of the things I said that I wanted to track kind of like the overall progression of in the series is the curse. So we have our first like kind of snapshot of what the deal with the curse is. So we have, like I said in when we were going through the summary, that the family's been cursed for a long time. Like it says hundreds of years, which I also kind of forgot about. Like it's interesting that it's been so long. Like for as long as any of them can remember, for sure. And they can communicate with animals when they're weak or they're hugged, they transform, and then they change back after kind of an indeterminate amount of time. The other interesting thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that Yuki, or like we see some things that are happening with the way that the cursed family members feel about the curse, especially with Yuki. There's all these kind of mentions of him. He talks about the story with the kids whose memories had to be erased, and he seems to have a lot of guilt. He apologizes for bringing Toru into this kind of the family situation, and then we also see this narrative that maybe was being told to him by Akido that people wouldn't want to be close to him if they knew about the secret. Like there's a lot of shame, I think, involved in being cursed. So we get the first kind of look at that. And that comes up a couple of times.
And kind of interesting, like this, like he feels there's some shame involved with being cursed and everything, but at the same time he calls Kyo an outsider. So
yeah, it's interesting to note that.
Yeah, it's like we're all cursed, but you're a worse kind.
You're worse or even more cursed.
Yeah,
not just your average family curse.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that that's alluded to as well, or he makes that comment as well. There's I think in terms of some overarching themes, we have the theme of kind of like home and its relationship to self. I think like there's a lot of talk of the home. Like Toru talks about the tent. She's like, my home is my castle or something. Like she actually makes that comment. And then we have this Yuki also talking about wanting to get out of the family, but like he's literally talking about getting out of a physical place. Like, he was talking about getting out of the house, and he could only make it to another part of the family's house.
Yeah.
As if that, like, physical relationship is also related to how he feels about the family being within the family, right? And even Toru, like, she's without a house. If you kind of extend that metaphor, Toru doesn't have a lot of contact with her family at this point in the story. So her being kind of on her own in her own house, she's also, like, outside of her family. Mm-hmm. They're presented as, like, there's a direct relationship between, like, the home, the physical space, and your personal connection. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because then, of course, Toru moves in with Shigure and Yuki and Kyo. So then they have this, like, de facto family that gets set up at the end of this chapter. These two are kind of the end of the first chapter. So I think that relationship to the physical space and the family is really interesting. I think that's going to also come out a lot more later in the series. So, and what that does and what that space does to people. Mm-hmm.
There's also, like, how Kyo had run away for a while.
Yeah.
Now they're making him live in Shigure's house.
They're, like, forcing him back. Yeah. It's like they're pulling him back. He was outside and they're bringing him back into whatever's going on. Yes, you're right. So that's interesting. And then also we have, I think there's an overall theme of loss that keeps coming back. You know, it's mostly centered around Toru at this point, but then we also have, like, the loss of memories. We have Yuki's kind of, maybe his loss of control over his relationships with people, like, where people's memories have been lost or they were erased. That's definitely a theme that's going to come up, I think, more and more. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have any other comments about that. It just seems like it seems like that's something that I noticed that it was prevalent a lot in the chapter and probably is going to come up again. So I think we'll track that more too. And then the other thing that is pretty clear is that you have this theme of transformation. We have, you know, the transformation of them from humans into animals, the people who are cursed. We also have, I think it's not strongly alluded to, but this series takes place when they are in high school. They're at this point where they're transitioning from, the main characters are transitioning from being children to adults. So we have this transformation of what one might think of as, like, a childlike behavior into an adult. And in fact, like, Toru, she's like, I need to live on my own someday. And so she goes and lives in a tent, which is, like, it's, like, not the right idea, but kind of, like, she's like, she makes a lot of allusions to, or makes a lot of kind of comments about having to live on her own, having to, like, take care of herself, having to be in this, like, adult kind of position early in this series.
It's implied she's kind of forced to have more adult responsibilities, even as a child. Like, you had the comment about her with the family budget notebook. Yeah. And it seemed like she was doing most of the cooking, too. Mm-hmm.
I think she does say that. I think she says it in the home ec part, where she's like, well, I had to cook a lot and whatever. She just kind of dismisses all her ability there, but yeah, it does seem like she had a lot of adult responsibilities because she was one of two people living in a house. And her mom was busy with other things.
Yeah, she's working all the time to take care of her, so.
Yeah. And then kind of, like, in contrast, you have Yuki, who
can't do anything.
He can't do anything. Yeah, you're right. He can't even, like, go out on his own. Like, he couldn't have lived in a tent. He says it himself. So he has this, like, they're almost like foils at this point, right? Like, it's like, if you compare them in that way, like, Toru's very responsible. She can take care of herself. She at least, like, certainly tries to. I don't know that she can. Like, the fact that she kind of faints and has to get taken care of, like, has to be taken in by them and almost got killed in a landslide is indicative of the fact that she's still a child, but I think she has a bit more...
Yuki would definitely have died.
No, he definitely would have died in the tent. He would have been afraid of the slugs, let's be honest. Yeah. And so...
I love Yuki, I'm not trying to be
No, he definitely would have died in a tent at this point in the story. And so, I mean, I think Kyo would have too. I don't think he could have handled it. Although I guess he was living in the woods, so yeah.
Has some survival abilities, even if
perhaps
he has no emotional
survival abilities. Yeah, for sure. He can definitely break a roof, and then he can definitely patch it up. So he's got maybe a bit of a head on Yuki, who doesn't even know how to take out the trash. So, you know, and Yuki also says, like, we get all these, like, really these clear memories of him being, like, he was taken care of as a child. Like, he had the family took care of the thing that happened where his curse was revealed. So he was his kind of, I don't know, that situation was cleared up for him, and then he moved with Shigure. Like, he tried to leave to be on his own, quote unquote, but he moved in with Shigure. So he's still being watched over and cared for by someone in the family. So I think that's a bit of a foil. So those are this like child and adult thing. I think that's a theme in like a lot of these like slice of life teenage stories, but it's definitely present here.
I think everything with teenagers you can technically call a coming of age story.
Yeah, so. I think this is definitely a coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all the characters, they come of age when bad things happen, question mark, I don't know.
Even the adults come of age.
Yeah, I think so. Well, some of them, we'll see, I guess. And then we also have this transformation of other things. So like we're presented with multiple versions of the Zodiac story, as if the story itself is changing and transforming over time. We have kind of like Toru's version from her mother. We have like Yuki being like, it was a calendar version, right? So we have a couple of different, and they're like, there's never room for a cat. It's like they all have this kind of opinion about this story, and I think that that's also we'll see. I think that evolve through the course of the story too, like especially around the curse.
Yeah, and I think even in just these chapters, sort of Toru's view on the story is changing from the version she killed from her mom, and then the stuff about the calendar, and then learning that it's not just a story.
Yeah, there's actually people who are cursed,
so actually like meeting some of the characters from the story essentially.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, it's true. It's like it's a dream come true.
Seeing it, I think, is changing already.
I think you're right. Is there anything not spoilery that you wanted that you noticed in these chapters that maybe you didn't notice before?
I was not noticed before, but I was surprised at how early the like memory erasure thing came up. Like, I remembered it being more vague about like, oh, something bad will happen if Akito decides you can't stay or whatever. But they were just like up front, like, no, your memories might get erased.
Yeah, he immediately says that.
Yeah.
I guess because that happened to Yuki, like he knows about it. Maybe other people who are of the Soma family who are possessed maybe don't know about it.
I think Shigure tried to keep it vague. But,
Yuki's immediately like, no.
Straight up like, no, this is what might happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just kind of interesting how up front they are. Like, we were talking about how it's seen as a lighthearted series, but some of the darker stuff actually comes in pretty early. Because erasing all these kids' memories and stuff is pretty dark.
Yeah, it is. No, you're totally right. And like kind of, and this, how closely guarded this secret is quite dark, I think, too. It's not like they're just like, yeah, it's cool, we have the superpower and we change into animals. No, it's like, it's a serious business secret that they have.
Like even it's mostly presented as like a comedic thing at this point, but the characters who are cursed take it pretty seriously.
Yeah, you're right. There's an interesting dichotomy there. It's like they're covered in like poopy clouds that cover their junk, but then yet they're like, but now that you found out about this, we're going to erase your memories. So there's this weird, like, it's kind of presented, and they're cute. I think one interesting thing that I think about when I think about this series is like the actual character design for the animals too. Like it's not like she draws them like a realistic cat or like a realistic dog. They're like cartoony versions of them. Like I mean, I guess obviously manga is like an abstraction, but I still think you could take it in a more realistic direction, but she doesn't. So stylistically, like I guess they're also
cute. People want to buy.
Yeah, they're cute. Them. Totally. I want all the Kyo stuffed animals.
I used to have a Kyo stuffed animal.
I think I had a Shigure stuffed animal at one point. so many things.
I left it at my parents' house, and they were selling some of my stuff that I didn't want anymore. And I just got a text from my dad that was a picture of the holding up the Kyo stuffed animal. Like, what the heck is this?
You're like, it's an anime cat, of course. Please.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Can't you see the little angry mark?
Yeah, of course. Well, he was constantly angry, so.
Yeah.
When I think of him as a cat, I think of him being angry, like angry-eyed cat version of Kyo. Yeah, for sure. I don't know if that's like a merch reason. I don't know if it's just like a. Yeah, it's cute, right?
Just cute animals. Yeah.
It's cute. I think the target audience for this is, it is younger girls. So maybe there's something about that like it's cute. I don't know. But then there's like all this other stuff.
Yeah, but it is kind of an interesting contrast.
Yeah, it is.
Cute animals and how seriously they take it.
Yeah, they're super cute, but then they'll erase your memories. So is it that cute? This is the question I would pose. Adorable. Erasing your memories is adorable. So yeah, they do take it very seriously, and yet they're adorable. Also, I think there's so if you're reading the Tokyo Pop version, the way that they call each other is something to note. So Toru calls Yuki Somakun, and he calls her Honda-san. So like they are not that close. They're calling each other by their last name. Like she has nicknames for her friends, so it's not like she refers to everyone that way. She like shortens their names, so they're Hana-chan and Uo-chan.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't, I mean, I bet everyone who's listening to this probably understands what I'm talking about without having to be explicit. But if you don't, like the way that they're referring to them with these honorifics, indicating that they are not very familiar with each other. So that's something to note. It's not like they're like BFFs and they knew each other. Well, she just kind of knew who Yuki was, and Yuki kind of knew who she was. They were in the same class, but maybe that kind of indicates how socially removed Yuki is, or maybe how socially removed Toru is. It's not like she knows, like the other girl in the class was picking on her, so maybe that kind of says something about her status in the school too. But it's something that I didn't think about too much the first time I read this. It just seems like she's like, whatever, just some girl at school, but it could be that she's kind of on the fringe of the class as well. Yuki definitely does that on purpose, and I think that it's pretty clear when Uo gives that kind of background story about him pushing the girl away, like he's not very involved with people at school. So
yeah.
But it's explicit between the two of them that they don't know each other that well at this point, or they're not comfortable being less familiar with, or less formal with each other at this point. So that's something that I picked up on this time. Yeah.
I think she calls Kyo-san at this point.
She does. That's right. Yeah. Actually, she hasn't called him by name yet. That's I think in the next chapter. But yes. Maybe she's like, "Oh, you too, like, Kyo-san." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah."
Before he kicks the door for the second time.
Yes, correct. You're right. And that's the very end. So yeah, she does call him that. So she treats them all very respectfully, which I think is in her character.
Yeah, I don't know if she's directly addressed Seguri at this point.
I don't remember. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Not by name. That's everything I wanted to discuss before we talk spoilers. Is there anything else?
Nope, it's good for me.
Yeah, it's the beginning. So I'm sure all these things will build on as we go through. But I think that's it for now without talking spoilers. So with that, then we'll say goodbye, and then I'll play some music, and then we'll talk spoilers. So I thank you all for listening to this. It's my pleasure to talk about the series that I really enjoy. So it's nice that we get to do this. And you can find us at staytogetherpodcast.com, Stay Together Podcast on Tumblr, and you can email us directly at staytogetherpodcast@gmail.com if you want to tell us stuff directly or correct us or whatever. So,
Also, our opinions are wrong and dumb.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our opinions are wrong and dumb because we have them, so it's fine. Don't worry, it's cool.
They're ours.
It's true. They're wrong and dumb, but they're ours. So tell your friends, tell all your Twitter followers, write it in your zine, and
share Skywriter.
Yeah.
Clouds.
Stay together. It's great. And if you enjoyed this, of course,
I should stay together.
Yeah, we should. If you enjoyed this, you can always rate and review and subscribe on the podcast service of your choice, which will help us get noticed and shared around. I think that's it for now, so we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so we're coming back to talk about spoilers. There's a bunch of things that I alluded to in the I talked about in the discussion part that are like, they allude to some spoilery things, and I tried to be really careful when I talked about them. Like the way the curse changes, like it's definitely going to change. We're going to add more things to it.
Different versions of the story.
Yes, I think that was it specifically. That's like we're getting more. Like this is just 2, and it's going to change. We're going to get more kind of different views of the story at some point.
Yeah, and also how different the different members who are cursed view the curse and each other and themselves.
Yeah, right now we only got Yuki and Kyo are fighting, because they're the rat and the cat, so of course.
Yeah.
And then Shigure seems kind of benevolent. He's like taking care of them. He's always letting them live there. They seemed worried about Kyo, like that he was gone, but beyond that, I don't know. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about that I made in my notes are that there's the first thing is that I noticed that the allusion to the hat is made very early.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in the first scene or the second where she's leaving the tent, where Toru's leaving the tent, and it's just sitting there. So I find that really intriguing. It's one of the things that she has in the tent that she kept. Like it's something that she cares about enough that she would bring it into a small tent, a small living space to have with her.
Yeah.
So it's that important to her.
Mentioned much earlier than I remembered it.
Totally. And it's like you can completely miss it, which I think is on point. I think this is what you were kind of maybe one of the things you were alluding to when we were talking about in the like intro episode. We're talking about things that get foreshadowed really early that you don't notice. Like this is the first thing I thought of when you said that.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the, like, I noticed it right away reading it this time.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't pay any attention to it until she was talking about it later in the story.
I think it's mentioned like twice in these first 2 chapters, because there's the flashback.
You see it. Yeah, you get the whole flashback.
Yeah.
And one thing I was thinking of when I was reading it this time is Yuki is the one who goes and gets her stuff from the tent.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to bring the hat over.
That's true. He would have noticed it.
Like, I wonder if he had any kind of
maybe he forgot
about that, or yeah,
I don't know. In my recollection of what happened, what is to come, I don't think he no, he does remember it, because he remembers that it's Kyo's hat or whatever, right? Like it's a whole, but I don't know if he I don't know
if he like makes the connection at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I was kind of wondering, since he had to,
he would have seen it. Maybe it was really dirty. Maybe it was like covered in mud. I don't know. She's had it for a long time. Maybe it's like faded. Like I don't. Maybe he didn't notice. But yeah, he doesn't. We don't get any indication that he recognizes it yet. Yeah, it's cool. And then I think we talked about this while we were talking about the non-spoilery stuff, but the incident with Yuki's friend's memories getting erased, that was shockingly early.
Yeah.
Like, I always think of the mind-erasing stuff happening when she meets Hattori, which is, like, I think...
Yeah, that's what
a couple chapters from now.
It was, like, vague until Hattori came in, because then everyone was, like, freaking out about why Hattori was coming.
Yeah, and he's like, calm down. Everyone chill.
It's like I'm here to take a blackmail picture.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. And that's all I'm here for. And chaperone Momiji.
Yeah.
Also, he tells her directly about it quite early. It's not even just, like, he asks... Yuki tells her right away. Like, the whole story isn't... Because I think that he has, like, a fuller flashback of that later.
Yeah, there's some more detail
later. So it's just like, a thing happened.
Because I remember
he was very upset about it.
Yeah, there's a picture of him, like crying to Hattori.
About it. Yeah. Yuki and Hattori have an interesting relationship.
Yeah, I think the relationship between Hattori and the younger ones, especially Yuki and Momiji, who've been directly affected by his mind-erasing powers. Really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. So we'll get there later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how he brings that up right away. And then we get a very limited version of that story. One thing that I noticed that I never ever noticed before was that when Kyo notices Toru, or when they're talking about her being there, he's like, what is she doing here? Like, it implies that he knows her.
Yeah, because he says, like, why is she? And then kind of cuts himself off and says, like, why is there a girl here?
Why is there a woman here? Yeah, why is there a girl here? Which I never would have noticed.
I noticed that too, but it's like a very deliberate cutting himself off.
Yeah.
And changing what he's saying there.
Yeah. I wonder if the people who translated that noticed that. I mean, they obviously translated it, but, like, I wonder if that's... And then they realized it later. But it's just, like, a very... It's such a small detail that implies that he knows her, that he recognizes her. But she doesn't... I think at this point of the story... Well, like, most of the story is from Toru's point of view, really. Like, she's the main character, and, like, we get her interact... Like, there are scenes where she's not there, but most of it is stuff that happens to her. So it doesn't imply that she recognizes him. And he would be pretty recognizable with his orange hair.
Yeah, and I don't think they really met. I think...
He knew her, but they didn't meet, yeah.
Yeah, I think her mom kind of... Like, he knew her because her mom told him about her.
He creeped. I think he watched her. But he knew because he knew Toru's mother. And yeah, so it's interesting that also is set up right away. So the whole situation with them, we talked about this in the intro episode of the trailer as well. It was like the whole situation with him knowing her, with Kyo knowing Toru's mother, and him being there at the accident is set up right away. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
It's like everybody knows each other before the series starts.
Yeah.
You wind up realizing like everyone is...
They're all connected.
Had some kind of interaction with each other, which is kind of interesting. I always like those kind of stories where people in stories that seem totally separate wind up connected. But yeah, some of those get set up pretty early on, which I didn't remember.
And it seems like, yeah, it definitely seems like Toru's like a complete stranger. Like the story that we get is like Toru's completely a stranger to all these people, and she gets thrown into the mix of this crazy curse, like we read in the
it seems like the only connection is that like, oh, she goes to the same school as Yuki, which is not really a connection.
No, but clearly it's not, because like we were just talking about, they don't seem to know each other very well, even though they're in the same class. A lot of the characters knew each other before the series started.
Yeah. Had some kind of connection, even if they don't personally know each other.
That's true. Yeah. So that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see that unravel once again. And it is always interesting. I like that when that happens in a series too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we do get, so I talked about it in the first episode for sure, but we get the first hint of like Akito and Shigure's relationship, where they're definitely scheming something. It's still not clear what it is at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm very intrigued by this because Akito basically like freaks out that Toru's trying to pull them apart, but Akito seemed to be in on having her live there.
Yeah.
So
I think was it Ren who convinced Akito?
Ren convinced Akito to let Toru live there? Oh, I don't know.
I think it was someone, because I think if I remember right, so they were like basically betting with Akito. It's like, oh, if they really love you, this won't be a challenge. And then
that's entirely possible, and not something that I remember.
Akito was convinced. It's like, oh yeah, this will just prove that it's like this person living there. She won't want to stick around. She won't like them because they're cursed. And it will prove to them that I'm all they have.
Yeah, that's entirely possible.
I think that's what I remember it being. And then
yeah, that seems like something Ren would do.
When it started not going that way is when Akito started freaking out.
That's entirely possible. Yeah, because they have a terrible, terrible relationship. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised. That seems exactly like something that would happen. So if that's true, then I forgot it, and I'm excited to see it again.
I think I remember something along those lines. I may have some of the details wrong.
Yeah, that will be, I don't know, that'll be interesting, because like their whole relationship is a thing.
Akito's everything is just
it's a thing.
Deeply, deeply fucked.
Yeah, it's so deeply fucked. It's coming. Yeah. Oh boy.
Another thing about Akito. Do you remember when everyone thought Akito might be the rooster?
Oh yeah.
So is that bird?
Yes, I do remember that. It's implying
something else, but I remember everyone thought
it might be implying something else. I don't know if it's actually ever. I think it could be. Akito's always pictured with that bird, so I feel like there might be some obvious like bird cage metaphor.
Yeah, I think it might be implying something about the weird issue with Karena that's going on there too.
Maybe.
Yeah.
The bird, there's like multiple times that a bird is used to represent Kareno. Like there's that time with Arisa where they find the dead bird. So, like at the end. So that definitely is possible too.
Yeah.
It could be like, I guess it could be the bird. The bird is out of the cage. Akito's always holding the bird, almost always. So maybe that implies that that's some kind of like secret, really in-depth reading of the visuals that Kareno is free from the curse, because I think he is at this point.
Yeah,
already
free from Akito.
Yeah, well, who is
no, not even Akito is free from Akito.
No, not even Ren is free from Akito.
Yeah. Deeply, deeply fucked.
Yes, deeply fucked. So maybe, I don't know. But that bird, there is like this specific imagery that's always used with Akito. Like the bird is one, and then there's the flowers, which I don't think is used yet. There's this like specific type of flower that's red. There's like there's a lot of like colored drawings of Akito with that flower, and it's not like a rose.
I think that's on the cover with Akito on it too.
I think you're right. I think it is. Oh, I think it's a little thing in the back. You mean like the thing that's like their little symbol?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shockingly, it's not the bird. It's the flower. There's a post, I'll have to try to find it for later, where someone had detailed kind of like the meaning of that flower and the symbolism of that flower. So we'll see that come up, but it hasn't come up yet, so I won't talk about it yet in the main. Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting from way late in the series that's shown early on is you're talking about how you can see the cliff above Toru's tent in the early pages before it winds up collapsing on the tent. Those cliffs and landslides will come back.
Yeah, I know. It's It's funny when I was reading that the first time, you're just like, oh shit,
Yeah.
it's happening. Like this was, and it's very clearly, it's set right at the beginning that that land is unstable. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
don't know how far away from the house it is. Like there's no real relationship, but like
Yeah.
out in the woods.
It's not a map. It's not a fantasy novel.
No, there should be though. I would enjoy having a map of like
None
Shiguri's
of
little
so
property because they have. Well, there is a map of the main house that Momiji
Yeah.
draws.
Yeah.
I think to explain it to people, and there's also like that lake. Like Shiguri's house is near a lake, so
Mhm.
it's a big like natural area that it's in.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they own all that land too,
Mhm.
and it just is also like even more. It's also secluded.
Yeah.
Like even though Yuki tries to kind of get out, quote unquote, of the house, of the main house, of the family, he still ends up in this area that's completely like tied off still from other people.
Which makes that food delivery even more incredible.
Yes, I know. I always wonder, they have to like walk to school. I wonder how long it takes them. There's all these scenes of them walking through the woods. I'm like,
Mhm.
how far away is the school? Like, anyway, how far away? How long is it taking that guy on a motorbike driving through the woods in the dark to get to their house?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
The delivery people can't even find my apartment. I don't know how they find that.
Good question. All good questions. It's the magic of Japan. It's the magic of anime.
So much more efficient there.
And clearly, Google Maps is more efficient. Actually, Google Maps probably didn't even exist back then. It's like MapQuest. Maybe Shigure gave him like explicit directions. Also, they order food all the time, so that maybe the guy knows them and knows how to get there. But yeah, is there any other like spoilery things that you noticed that you wanted to discuss?
I mean, a little one is that you can see Kyo with his bracelet first thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see it right away.
Yep. Something I'm excited that the new anime has it painted the right colors.
Yes. Right off the bat, we'll get to see that it's red and therefore saturated with the blood of a priest or whatever it is. It's interesting. So it's good. It's good. It's exciting. The new visuals are all really exciting. I'm excited about it.
I used to have one of those cosplay bracelets, but I think I broke it.
I have mine and found it when I was cleaning stuff from my parents' house. So it's sitting on my desk right now. So it's not red though, which is still even at the time I wish it was
every
red.
now and then, but I don't know if they were official or just something people made. What was it, Suncoast that used to have all
oh yeah
all the anime merchandise,
or like FYE.
Yeah.
Oh, good times in the early 2000s when we still had video stores.
Yep, going to the mall.
I can't. I don't know. Who needs to go to the mall anymore? That's what I have Amazon Prime for.
Hanging around, loitering in the mall.
Yeah, it's good times. I don't think there's anything else that I noticed that is going to tie into something else later.
Yeah, I think those are all my big spoiler notes.
Sweet. In that case, I think that's it for this episode.
Alrighty.
All right. So next time we're going to discuss chapters 3 and 4. And thanks for listening and for sticking through the spoilery section if you did. And that's it for now. Yeah. So we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.